It's important to have strong learning objectives when you begin to design an online course. This presentation introduces the basics of writing learning objectives for the course, as well as for individual modules. By completing this module, you will be able to write course and module level learning objectives. Objectives serve a number of purposes. The most obvious benefit is that objectives help you design a stronger course, because you can plan the course with the end in mind. Objectives define what students should learn by the end of the course, so you can more easily plan learning activities and content that help students achieve those goals. Objectives also help you communicate your expectations to students, including what the important concepts are in the course. This helps students focus their effort on the most critical concepts and assessments. Objectives also help you describe the benefits of the course to students, so that they know what they will gain by putting effort into the course. Objectives also help you communicate your vision to your instructional designer, so he or she can help you come up with better strategies in your online course. There are two types of objectives in most online courses. The first are course objectives, which describe the overall outcomes of the course. You may need to write these if they do not exist, but they may be mandated by your department. Module objectives are written for individual modules, units, weeks, or topics, depending on how you have structured your course. The module objectives should clearly align with your course objectives, but are more granular and detailed. They may break a single course objective into multiple smaller segments that build on each other through several modules as students gain mastery. Module objectives may seem like busy work, but are an important step in ensuring that the modules are all aligned with the overall course objectives. They also help students to see how each module and topic is connected to the overall purpose of the course. Let's start by looking at the characteristics of objectives. The first important characteristic of objectives is that they are always written from a student's perspective. Generally, they complete a sentence similar to, "By the end of the course, you will be able to." Because of this, objectives state what students will learn, not what the course will cover. It's also important to write objectives with language that students can understand, so that the objectives are meaningful to them. The second characteristic of objectives is that they are specific. In other words, each objective precisely describes a single item that students will learn, whether that is a skill, performance, area of knowledge, or attitude. Finally, objectives are always observable and measurable. Generally, this means using active verbs to describe the behavior that students will learn. Avoid terms like understand and know. Students might understand something by the end of the course, but what does it really mean to understand something? If you are tempted to use a vague term, think about how you will know that students have achieved that understanding or knowledge, and write the objective with that term instead. For example, instead of understanding a concept, perhaps it is clearer to say that students will be able to describe or explain it. When we write objectives stating what students will learn, it's important to think about at what cognitive level students will be engaged in. Bloom's taxonomy, here in its revised form, provides a framework for thinking about how deeply students will learn new content. For example, in an introductory course, students may need to learn at the lower levels of the taxonomy, so the objectives will contain verbs like define, list, explain, or discuss. However, in a capstone course, students may need to develop a deeper understanding. In this case, the objectives would be written at the upper levels of the taxonomy and include verbs like contrast, critique, design, or build. The most important reason for thinking about the cognitive level of an objective is to make sure that the learning activities and assessments match that level. If an objective states that the students will be able to compare something, but the assessment asks students to define instead, there is a breakdown in the alignment of the course. Since you will likely have to write objectives for at least the module level of an online course, here are some guidelines for writing objectives. There are three main parts to an objective: the performance, conditions, and criterion. First, the performance is the knowledge, skill, or behavior that students will learn. As you already learned, the performance must be an active verb that is specific and measurable. The second part of an objective is the condition. The condition influences the performance. Describe any givens, limitations, or resources the students will use or is prohibited from using. The last part of an objective is the criterion or degree to which the students must perform. The criterion describes how well the student must be able to perform the task. For example, let's consider the objective that states, by the end of this course, you will be able to deliver an organized and effective persuasive speech using visual aids. In this case, the performance is deliver a persuasive speech. This is the performance that students are expected to learn by completing the course. The condition is using visual aids. To be successful in this objective, students must use visual aids in their persuasive speech. Other potential conditions could be to a live audience or using at least 3 sources. This objective has 2 criteria. To be successful, the students must be able to deliver their speech so that it is organized and effective. Since effective is particularly difficult to judge, the assessment for this objective would need to have a further description or rubric to help students understand how they can be effective. Now you try. What is the performance in this objective? Now, what is the condition of the objective? Remember that the condition refers to circumstances that influence the performance. Now, what is the criterion of the objective? The criterion describes how well or to what degree students must master the performance. Crafting strong objectives can be time-consuming, but it is time well spent. The course and module objectives together form a foundation for the rest of the course design. Good objectives should be written from a student's perspective so that they are meaningful to students. Objectives should also be specific, observable, and measurable. Finally, objectives have 3 components: the performance, condition, and criterion. The performance should be written with an active verb instead of using vague terms like know or understand.